Welcome back everyone, this is Joe. In this video I want to show you how to make a dynamic date table. This is one of those very easy things that makes a whole lot of sense a whole lot of the time. I wasn't really doing it much until someone at work turned me on to it. And I just noticed that it's a lot easier to make a dynamic date table on the fly that updates automatically for you as opposed to try and get data from another data source and pull a whole date table in that may have start and end dates that don't align with your data. So we're here in this DSBB Power BI 2 worksheet. If you've been following along, you have this one. If you haven't, just try to follow along in this video, but I encourage you to go back to the beginning of the Power BI playlist and get to this point with us. There aren't that many videos, so it shouldn't take too awful long to get up to speed. And if you don't know where that is, it's in the same spot we've been saving everything. DSBB Power BI 2, it's desktop DSBB for me. So go ahead and open this up, and we only have one data source table, right? We have entity, first of year, life expectancy. First of year is the column that we went ahead and just created. A couple things to consider before we jump into using this first of year to make a dynamic date table. Go to File and Options and Settings and Options, and then you want to go to Current File Data Load to make sure that your auto time intelligence is turned on, because we can use this once we pull in another data source, so another table, and then we can model this new date table that we're going to make to both of them. So auto date time, make sure that's checked before you do anything. Then go to your tables here, the only one we have, and make sure first of year is a date, not a date time. I've been burned by this. Since you have 12 a.m. in all of these, it's only going to look for other 12 a.m.s when you filter, and that might not always be the case. So you want to store this as a date, and I like to just use the short date. It's a little easier for the eyes, at least on me. Then go to Table Tools, and we'll actually create this new date table first. So we do New Table, and we'll just call it Date, and then you use this Calendar function. What this is going to do, it requires a start date and an end date. And so we're making this dynamic, right? So we want the minimum date of that column that I just mentioned, so the first of the year. Or you can do, instead of minimum, first date right here. And then you can do last date, or you can just do min and max. Doesn't matter, or at least I haven't seen it matter. And then two parentheses, one to close the last date and one to close the first date. So if you have min here and max here, same thing. You can click enter, and then it will generate one day after the other all the way from the minimum and the maximum. So you can see why this would be useful, because instead of just guessing and bringing in a start date all the way back to the beginning of time, or like 2 years ago, and then going all the way to the present, that could contain way more dates than you actually need. This will always contain the dates. It will always reference your main table that you care about the most and pull the minimum and maximum dates and then all the dates in between. So it's useful if you want that to be the case. Then you can go to modeling here, and you could take your new date field and model it to the first of the year. You could even call this first of the year so that it's a little more clear, but I'm going to leave it called date for now. So then in here, we can get rid of the relative date just for now. If you did that in a prior video, just X that off of your page. Now we don't need to use this year anymore. We can use the year from this date here, and since it's auto hierarchy, we don't even need to go create the year, quarter, and month columns. It's done that for us already because it's recognized it as a date table. So if I just drag year into the mix, turn it into a slicer from this visual over here by clicking this little filter one, and then I can change it back to a drop down. And if you remember from prior videos, right, this doesn't matter that it's actually multi-select now. We've foolproofed that measure. So I can select multiple dates, and you can see it all change over here to the right. And this will grab all of the appropriate dates here on this side and on this side. The measure is set up to do it however you ask it to. Oh, one important note, and I just remembered this. Go ahead and clear this right here. I did realize that we, in this measure here, referenced the downstream table. So we're referencing the date in here, and now that we have an upstream table date that we're not referencing at all, this could pose a problem. So the average life expectancy is fine for any selected year. That doesn't matter because we're just taking an average of what's in here and we're using date to filter it. However, we're actually specifically writing the dates that we want in this measure. So in that case, we have to change up the measure to reference the new date. So this will make sense in a second. If you click this one here, average life expectancy as of a certain date, I mean, you can notice right here that these two are the same, which is not correct. This is supposed to be a running total as of a date. So anywhere you have year from this table reference, you just have to change now to date year, and or it might be, I think you just do date date. That should work. Yeah. So we'll do date date and selected value of date date, and make sure it's just table in backticks and then in your open close brackets the column that you want. So I would select everything like that and then start typing date and then find the date, and let's just verify that this is doing what we hope. Since we have nothing right now, it's just looking at 2016, but let's do 1806 for example, and this looks good because it's doing life expectancy for selected year all the way up to present, so you'd expect that to be higher. And then in 2016, remember we tied everything out, so if you click that, we should see the same numbers. But if we go back to 2015, they should change slightly. And then we have to like take one off, right? Because otherwise it's the exact same thing that we're looking at, and you can see that this one is slightly higher. So it looks like it's doing exactly what we want it to do. And so now we want to make some fake data. I'm going to use, I think birth rates would be a good example, right? That'd be something that you'd want to compare to life expectancy. And I don't actually have a data set, so I'm going to totally make this up. I'll do a file save as on our life expectancy one. Save it in the same place, and I'll just call it birth. I'll call it fake birth data, and click save. So just click yes through that, and I want to use the first of year column actually, but I don't have that here, so let's just do a equals, and then I'll do a 1 close it and 2016, right? So then I can double click this all the way down. I'm going to do a Control C or just copy everything. I'm going to paste this into here, and then I'm going to click Comm D and just delete it. But then I'm going to call this first of year like we have it in our data set now. And then I'm just going to make up birth rates, or like number of births, let's call it. Number of births on that day. And so let's do random between 1 and 1,000. It doesn't necessarily matter. I think we need to do random between, yes, 1 and 1,000, okay. And then I'll double click this all the way down. Make sure by doing a Control Shift down that it goes all the way down, and it does. And then I'm just gonna copy and paste this column just so it doesn't continuously calculate every time we enter something. And then I'll do file save. Now we can source this data, and I can show you, why it would be useful to do it this way with a date dimension. So then go back into Power BI, we can do get data, then we can do a text CSV, and then we can pull this fake birth data in by double clicking the file. So it will establish a connection. It's going to give you a little display. I don't think we need to transform anything, but I'll click it just to make sure that we have the data type for the second column stored as date. That's the one important thing, and it looks like it is a date already. This is a number, this is a text field, so I think we're good there. I'll do close and apply. And depending on your settings, this will do an auto relationship or it might not, but I'm going to check either way. I always check, that's just a personal habit. And it looks like it did not. I usually have that setting toggled off. So I'll do first of year, and I didn't exactly state it correctly, and I don't even want it modeled to this one. I want it to here, right? Because I want this date field to be the upstream filter for both of these tables down here. So you'll see a one-to-many relationship. Don't worry about this measure for now. And then, so this date here, which is actually already on the screen, right? I'm using this to filter, is going to go from one to many and filter this whole table, and this will go from one to many and filter this whole table. So now I should be able to just, I don't even think I need to write a measure here. I can just put number of births right into the table, and I'll resize a bit, and it should just do sum. And it's not grouping it by entity, it's just doing it by date, so that could be an issue. Quick fix on that, I mean, you'd probably want some sort of entity dimension table that you pull into the mix, and possibly you might even want to model this by entity instead of just date. I mean, you'll see that if you change the dates, the births are going to change, but it has no idea how to split this up by entity, right? It's just a number of births table. Entity is in that table, but right now date is the only filter. And so this data here, these two columns, is not in any way associated with the births here. So we could do a distinct entity on either of the tables just for a quick fix on this. So if we go back to tables and we make a new table, we can just make an entity table and then do a distinct entity from either of these, because we know it's the same, so you just have to know your data in this case. And then we'll get a one column, here are your entities. Now we can go back to the model, and again this will be an upstream filter that filters on both. So you could do entity like this, should do one to many with no issues since we did a distinct, and then this one would also be a one to many. So again, it won't affect our average calcs in any way, but we do need to replace this column now with the upstream entity column, and then this will fix itself. So if we go to our entity table, pick entity there, and then delete this first one, now you can see it's actually able to break it up, right? Because this entity is coming from the upstream table that is able to filter both the downstream tables where we're doing our calculations. So just an average on the life expectancy, a couple backflips on this one, but ultimately it's just looking at the date, and it's modeled directly to the date and the life expectancy as well. And then this is just looking at births, and you only have one plot because you're only on 1 year now. So go ahead and select as many as you want. And now you can see everything change a little bit. And you can see this is a sum of births, I believe. Let's double check down here. But we can also do average and then just keep everything average. You can write a measure for it, but we already know how to do that, and that's a little out of scope. Just wanted to show you the benefits here of making these dynamic tables. I didn't actually intend to do the distinct entity one, but we were able to make two upstream tables on the fly without actually loading in any more data, and then we leveraged them in our report. So hope that was helpful, and we'll see you in the next one.